June 1968, Good Hart, Michigan. The well-to-do and wealthy Robison family from a suburb of Detroit are found murdered in their summer cottage on Lake Michigan. All 6 of them. Who would want this entire family dead? And why, some 55 years later, are there still questions looming over this crime? This is the story of the Robison family, the Good Hart murders. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Podorf. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our Tibetan friends, Chibai, Chibai, Chibai.
Nice.
That was an easy one.
Nicely done. Well, wherever you are listening or watching, please subscribe, like, rate, and review. We really appreciate those reviews because when you do it, you let other people see our little crime-obsessed family.
Yep.
So thank you.
Yes.
And welcome to all our new YouTube watchers and our new in-laws and outlaws.
Yep.
Speaking of, if you want to join, just type into Facebook H2H In-Laws and Outlaws and you'll find us. Got to answer a couple questions.
Easy ones.
We will welcome you with open arms.
Yes, we will.
Well, spring has sprung where we are in Kentucky.
Yep.
Hopefully for you too, wherever you're listening.
Yes.
It's getting warm, and that makes me think of summer and cookouts and pool time and
T-shirts
oceans
and flip-flops.
and vacation. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're going to talk about a family's vacation from hell.
Uh-oh.
You know, people will come back from vacation and be like, oh, it was great. Or they come back and they're like, oh, it was the vacation from hell.
Yeah, I need a vacation to recover from my vacation.
From your vacation? Well, this vacation from hell, this family did not survive.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's a true crime
That's true.
podcast. Yeah. It's really interesting. It's over 50 years old. And I just really wanted to do it because it made me think of summer.
Yes.
Well, and hopefully it'll make you think of summer like it did me too.
Yes.
But hopefully your summer vacation doesn't turn out like the Robisons family. I'll just say that from the get-go. We love you all way too much.
I'm scared already.
Before I get started, let me thank some sources: Wikipedia, Northern Express, the Battle Creek Inquirer, the Evansville Press, Detroit American, Michigan Live, Up North Live, Seeker's Crime, and Our Detroit. There is a book, When Evil Came to Good Hart, by Marty Link. I didn't read it, but it does seem to be the quintessential source because she's even updated it since she wrote it. I will put a link to the book and all the other sources in the show notes.
All right. You ready?
I am.
All right, let's do it.
The Robison family was kind of ideal. The father, Richard, or Dick Robison, owned a highly successful advertising agency in Detroit, as well as an art magazine called Impresario.
Okay.
The family lived on Dolores Avenue in Lathrop Village, which is a small area of Southfield, Michigan, and it's just about 16 miles from the city of Detroit.
All right.
Their 3-bedroom ranch was new when they bought it for $29,500.
Wow.
And they moved in 1953.
Wow.
In 2023, that's about a $340,000 home.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Their house was close to an office park on Southfield Road where Dick ran his ad agency, R.C. Robison and Associates, and the magazine.
All right.
Now, Dick and his wife, Shirley Loretta Fulton Robison, loved attending the theater. Dick liked to paint. He was a pilot. The Robisons went to church regularly, and Dick and Shirley did not drink, they did not smoke, and they did not gamble, nor did they have any known enemies.
Really? Okay.
Or did they?
Yeah, it's the quiet ones you have to be careful of.
It is. Yeah. Dick's businesses are doing well, and 15 years after they move into their new home, they now owned a summer house and their own Cessna Skyhawk plane.
Wow. Okay.
In the summer of 1968, 42-year-old Dick Robison was taking his family to Good Hart, Michigan, and the private summer resort of Blisswood, where the family owned a log and stone cottage they had named Somerset.
So it wasn't Bushwood.
It is not Bushwood, and I knew you were going to say that when I saw Blisswood.
You wore green because you thought you could hide. Sorry.
It's a Cinderella story.
Yeah, it's a Cinderella.
Here at Augusta. This summer home is just north of Harbor Springs, Michigan. It's down a twisty, turny dirt road that is hard to find and is just about a half a mile from Lakeshore Drive. And the front door of Somerset, their little house, which has this name, the front door of Somerset is 100 feet away from Lake Michigan.
Okay.
This same summer, the family was planning on taking a side trip to Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
To look at a horse farm.
Really?
They were thinking of buying one, and then they were traveling on to Florida to buy a condominium.
Wow.
And the project Dick was gathering investors for, well, a man named Mr. Roberts was supposed to fly into Pellston, Michigan on his private Learjet to spend some time with the family and talk business with Dick.
Okay.
On this fun and busy summer trip, Dick and his 40-year-old wife Shirley are taking their 4 children with them. Richard Carl Robison, Jr., or Ritchie, is 19 years old and is a student at Eastern Michigan University.
Okay.
Gary Lee Robison, age 16, is a student at Southfield Lathrop High School, and he plays in what we would now call today a garage band.
All right.
Yeah.
I know about those.
Rob's all in favor. Randall Mark Robison, or Randy, is 12 years old, and Randy loved to play with his best friend Tom, who lived a couple doors down from him in Lathrop Village. Randy and his friend Tom like to ride bikes and work on their stamp collections. And Susan Claire Robison, the only girl, is 7 years old. Susie was quiet, she had big blue eyes, and I read that she had dreams of owning a pony. And if they were looking at buying a horse farm in Kentucky, she would definitely have a place to keep him.
She's in hog heaven or horse heaven.
Horse heaven, yeah. The whole lot of them leave Lathrop Village on Sunday, June 16th, 1968. And while Dick is away from the office and both businesses, he's left in charge Joseph Scolaro,
Okay.
a man who'd worked for Dick since 1965 as assistant to the publisher of Impresario magazine.
Got it.
By all accounts, the Robisons were having a wonderful summer in their beautiful lake home. Dick would call the office regularly, and he even took his briefcase with him for the long trip, which makes sense. Because even if you're away on pleasure, you still bring business with you. Rob and I take our laptops with us everywhere we go because we own our own businesses. And that's what Dick was doing.
Sure.
You have to stay on top of everything. Dick was on top of everything.
You cannot be out of communicado for a second.
You can't. After the first week on vacation and on Tuesday, June 25th, Dick calls his bank. He wants to know if a $200,000 deposit he was expecting to be in the account had made it there. The bank official tells Dick, no, there's nothing there.
Okay.
No deposits of $200,000.
Right.
And Dick, according to the bank, was really perplexed by the low balance in the company account. The only other person who has access to this account is the guy Dick's left in charge at the office, Joe Scolaro.
The fox in the hen house.
And in fact, Joe had been in charge at the office for the last 3 months because Dick was out and about gathering investors for his new secret project. At this point, Dick starts calling the office several times. We know this because the phone records are available later.
Okay.
The receptionist at R.C. Robison and Associates answers the phone, and Dick is fit to be tied. After he has a discussion with Joe, Joe walks out of the office at 10:30 that morning and does not return that day.
Okay.
After Dick's heated conversation with his office, he goes to visit Chauncey Bliss, the caretaker of their cabin and the areas around Blisswood. He actually goes by the name Monty.
Okay.
And Dick wanted to pay his respects because Monty's son had recently died in a motorcycle accident. And Dick left $20 for flowers for the son and then went to see Monty's parents to give his condolences. Seems like Dick's a good guy, right?
Yeah.
That afternoon, back at Somerset, the family is gathered in the cottage, And around 4 p.m. on June 25th, the family was getting ready for their trip the next day to Florida via private plane. Russell Figg, a man who was the gardener of the Blisswood complex of homes, is trimming trees just outside Somerset.
Okay.
And when Russell finished working around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Dick paid him for his work. And Russell saw Ritchie and Gary, the 2 older sons, but not Shirley, Susie, or Randy. And later, Russell is going to say that he felt like something was, quote, off, end quote.
Okay.
The fact is, Russell is the last person to ever see or speak with any of the Robisons.
Really?
That night, all 6 would be dead.
Really? Wow.
Here is what is believed to have happened.
Okay.
The killer came out of the dense woods that surrounded their home around twilight. Through a window near the front door, several shots were fired into the cottage's living room. Dick is hit in the chest with a bullet from a .22 caliber rifle while sitting in his easy chair. And the other family members, realizing what's happening, they all run for cover. The killer or killers burst through the front door, gunning down Shirley and Randy. And as soon as they see Susie trying to hide, they also shoot her. The 2 oldest boys, Ritchie and Gary, are at a table playing cards. Ritchie and Gary race to a back bedroom where there is a rifle stored in a closet there.
Okay.
The killer shot each of them down. The killer then returned to little Susie, striking her in the head with a claw hammer. Richard and Shirley are both bludgeoned with the hammer as well. Then the killer shot every single one of them in the head, point blank.
Wow.
Now, you'd think that all that gunfire would alert somebody, right?
Right.
Well, the nearest cabin was 100 yards away, and that family wasn't even home.
Yeah, I was going to say, if they're in a cabin out in the...
in the middle of nowhere.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, they were going there for seclusion.
Right.
A couple who lived a quarter of a mile away heard gunshots and the shouts of 2 men and a woman. They don't investigate because they think somebody's shooting seagulls.
Right.
And not to mention, it's still light outside. I mean, summer nights, late June, early July, it's still light at 9:30 in the evening.
Yeah, sure.
The killer throws a blanket over Shirley after her dress is lifted and her underwear is cut on one hip and pulled down around her ankles. She is not raped, but they're thinking that they wanted to make it look like she was raped.
Gotcha.
So it was that kind of home invasion.
Right.
Dick, 7-year-old Susie, and 12-year-old Randy are dragged into the hallway and piled on top of each other near the home's furnace.
Wow.
The other 2 boys are left in the bedroom. Now, before leaving, the killer writes a note on a piece of cardboard, placing it over the window where the bullet hole was, that said, quote, "We'll be back, Robison," end quote.
Wow.
And before they left, they turned the heat up as high as it would go in the cabin.
Wow.
And made sure the furnace was on.
Yeah.
The next day, Monty notices that a light is on inside Somerset, but when he comes back later, a few days later, this light is off. There's really no time frame that's ever referenced exactly for this, but the light is seen after June 25th, the day that they're murdered. So perhaps a light is left on and then it eventually burns out.
Right.
Or did somebody actually come back to the cottage after the murders?
Okay.
For the following 27 days, the bodies of the entire Robison family basically rotted in the heat of the cottage. Because remember, it's now July. They're in there. The killer turned up the thermostat.
Yep.
The house is just a hot box.
Yeah. Wow.
The 2 family cars they traveled upstate in are still sitting in the driveway. But this doesn't seem odd because remember, Dick's told everybody that he's leaving with the family to go to Kentucky and Florida.
Sure.
And they're flying. So why would they need their cars?
Right.
Why wouldn't they just leave them in the driveway?
Right.
The problem is it's starting to smell.
Yeah.
People are kind of shrugging this off at first, but when someone called in because the stench was ruining their annual bridge party at Blisswood, thought that was funny.
Yeah.
Monty Bliss and a helper go to the Somerset cottage thinking a raccoon has done gone and snuck up in the crawl space and died.
Yeah.
So Monty looks, there's no raccoon. So now he's thinking this damn coon's crawled down the chimney and is stuck.
Yeah.
No. So Monty goes to the back door of the cabin and the back door was locked from the inside. They used a screwdriver and some other tools to get into the house.
Ooh.
He could see at least one dead body, so he hightails it out of there and calls the Emmett County Sheriff in Petoskey and says, quote, "There's a body inside one of our cottages," end quote.
And how many days has this been so far?
Around 27 days in the July heat and with the heat on.
There's some stank.
Well, it ruined the bridge party. When the sheriff's deputies arrive, what they find is congealed blood and armies of dead flies all over the hardwood floor. The family is dressed as if they're going on a trip, and a partially packed suitcase is on one of the beds. And again, Shirley's dress is up and her panties are down around her ankles. One side has been cut.
Right.
The bodies were in such terrible condition that the corpses are actually turned away at the local Petoskey hospital.
Really?
They had to perform the autopsies at the local fairgrounds inside a chicken coop.
Oh, man.
Out in the open air. The investigators wore hazmat suits and gas masks to inspect the crime scene. They found 15 shell casings, 11 from a .22 caliber rifle and 4 from a .25 caliber handgun. That's a very small gun.
Yeah.
An expensive ring and cash are also missing from the cottage, but the rest of the valuables are left behind. There is one bloody footprint on the hardwood floor. So authorities believe there's a wild killer on the loose in the sleepy little vacation spot on Lake Michigan called Good Hart.
Okay.
There's not a lot of evidence for the police to work with. After the killer beats in people's heads, the hammer is discarded at the scene, but any chance of lifting a fingerprint is lost when a policeman holds it up using a handkerchief and ruins the prints.
Why is there always a Keystone Cop in all of these?
And get this, he was displaying it for the press.
Yeah, of course he was.
Dude.
Oh, my.
Oh, his 5 seconds of fame was really a bad move.
And that ended his 5 seconds of police
Yeah,
work.
it might have ended his career.
Yeah, exactly. Duh.
The most evidence is gleaned from the discarded shell casings, and the brand of ammo that was used was a rare finish type called Seiko.
Okay.
There were finger and palm prints taken at the cabin and on the property, and none of them really matched the family, but that could have happened at any point.
Sure.
There were more than one set of fingerprints on the property, which makes sense because there were friends in and out of their cottage over and over again.
Yeah.
And really, none of these people have fingerprints on file because it's the very wealthy and well-to-do.
Right.
Over the next few weeks, all people of interest in and around Good Hart are questioned, and the police come up with a theory. Quote, "We now believe the killer was familiar with the cabin, that he knew the family, and they knew him," end quote. This, according to the county sheriff.
Okay.
And now the investigation travels 275 miles south to Detroit.
Okay.
They're thinking that Dick was a high-powered businessman, and the community of Blisswood was a place where people came to vacation, not to commit murder. So it's got to have something to do with Detroit and not us.
Right.
Today, Blisswood is a lodge and 3 cabins that you can rent out. You can rent out the whole kit and caboodle,
Really?
and it sleeps 23 people. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. The history of this place is pretty remarkable. It was deeded to the Bliss family in lieu of payment for Civil War service in the 1860s.
Wow. Okay.
And in the mid-1800s, Blisswood was primarily a strawberry and apple farm.
Really? Okay.
The early 1900s found the Bliss family transitioning from farming to building, and a sawmill was built on the property, and construction of stone and log homes began, just like the one the Robisons had.
Yeah. Okay.
The original lodge was built in 1929.
Wow.
And I thought, gosh, that's really a long time. But then they're there in the 60s, and it's like, yeah, that's 40 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's... Well, I'm old now, so that doesn't seem like very long ago.
Isn't it amazing? The older you get, the less time seems to be. Yeah.
It flies by. But Good Hart is a lovely area, so the police are thinking there's no killer here. We got to punt this down to Detroit, to the big city. There's loads of ne'er-do-wells down there.
Right.
And the first ne'er-do-well they look at, Joseph Scolaro III. Joe spent 3 years in the Army and a year at Harvard before joining Dick's firm in 1965. What a great year, 1965.
That was the year she was born.
Yes, it is. He was a stocky 6-footer with a high IQ and an interest in guns. He was a competitive trap shooter, and he was used to hitting fast-moving targets. Make of that what you will.
Yeah.
Joe had no history of violence, but he was considered a con man.
Okay.
Detectives determined that he had embezzled about $60,000 from Dick's company, and Dick had only just discovered it.
Gotcha.
And now we have
Motive.
Yep. Enter Michigan State Police officers Lloyd Stearns and John Fliss. These two grilled Joe like a cheese sandwich. They want to know his whereabouts on the 25th of June because remember, the receptionist at the ad agency said that after Dick and Joe had a fight, he leaves at 10:30 and he does not return.
Right.
Looks bad.
Yep.
Joe's story is that he went to the Peerless Delta Faucet Plumbing Convention at Cobo Hall until around 5 p.m.
Okay.
Joe says he attended all 3 days of the convention. Then he had a drink at the Salamander Bar in the Hotel Pontchartrain before doing a little bit of shopping and then driving home in a rainstorm. But first he stopped at the Robison home because it had been raining really hard and he thought there might be a leak at Dick's house. Quote, sure enough, I found a leak and I had to spend a few hours sorting it out before heading home, end quote.
Okay.
That is effing convenient, Joe.
Yeah. I just thought maybe there'd be a leak, and it's amazing. There was a leak.
There was a leak, and I had to spend a couple of hours there. Now, not a single person could be found to corroborate Joe's whereabouts in the 10 to 11 hours after he leaves the agency that morning. One guy at the plumbing convention said that, yes, he'd spent a lot of time talking to Joe, but it wasn't on that Tuesday, that rainy Tuesday, because the day he was talking to him, the sun was shining. And one person who was exhibiting at the convention even made the statement to police that there were loads of people who skipped the last day of the convention, June 25th, because the weather sucked. It was raining so hard outside. And if you've ever worked a convention in a booth, you know that the last day you cannot wait to pack up and get out of there.
Right.
And he tells police that there were so few people on the convention floor that he indeed packed up his stuff and left early. So it's highly unlikely that Joe was there until 5 p.m. because everybody had packed up and gone.
Yeah. Floor was clear.
Pretty much. So the police's theory is that Joe is the killer. He gets some checks in the plus column, but there are reasons why he isn't a killer, too. Joe's ex-wife says he's home at 11 p.m., and neighbors heard gunshots at 9 p.m. around Somerset.
Okay.
So that's a little bit off.
Yeah.
And it's only 2 hours to travel 275 miles that would be at 138 miles per hour nonstop on the roads that are not interstates.
Right.
So that's not really possible either, for him to have been there, shot at dusk, and made it home by 11.
Right.
The police think Joe's ex-wife is being truthful because, according to them, who wouldn't want to stick it to their ex? Which I thought was kind of funny.
That's really funny.
Yeah. Stearns and Fliss learned that Joe had owned 2 model AR-7 .22 caliber rifles, the type of weapon determined to have been used in the murders. One was recovered from a friend in Chicago, but the other, supposedly given to his brother-in-law, will never be found. The detectives visited a private range where Joe was known to have fired the missing AR-7, and Fliss dug out some old cartridge casings from the mud. And a crime lab identified them as coming from the same gun used to kill the Robisons.
Really?
Yes.
Ooh.
Moreover, in early 1968, Joe bought 2 matching .25 caliber Beretta pistols. He said he kept one and gave the other to Dick, who brought it to the cottage. And based on the rare kind of ammo the pistols used, police conclude Robison's Beretta, Dick's Beretta,
Was the gun.
It's also missing.
Oh.
It was the second murder weapon.
Ah.
Yeah, you were on to it, but it was gone. The gun is gone.
Gotcha.
All in all, Joe Scolaro would take and flunk 3 polygraphs, according to Stearns.
Okay.
Quote, we interviewed him a dozen times. Not once did we ever walk away thinking, this guy's innocent, end quote.
Okay.
But it's not that clear cut, right? Because the drive between Detroit and Good Hart takes 5 to 6 hours. And witnesses heard shots about 9 p.m. the day of the murders. Yet Joe's wife said he was home in Birmingham by 11 that evening. And even if Joe was determined to kill the Robisons, skeptics say it would have been nearly impossible to do it within an 11-hour time frame.
Okay.
And arranging a contract killing on such short notice was also improbable.
Yeah. Well, that was the first thing I thought of. I thought, well, maybe he hired somebody to do it.
Just hire somebody to do it, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
At the same time they're looking into Joe, the police are digging into Dick Robison's life. And some secrets are being found. Dick had had several affairs.
Yeah.
He also had the habit of inviting a secretary into his office after work, then asking her to lift her skirt while he admired her legs.
Okay.
No sex was involved, but sometimes the ogling and fondling lasted as long as an hour. To which I say, ew.
Yeah.
What a sexually abusive asshole.
Yeah. It's still.
Can you imagine? Give me a little twirl, sweetheart.
It's still cheating.
Yeah, I hate that.
Yep.
But his assholery didn't stop there. And remember, he was called, quote, the man without a vice in the newspapers.
Right.
Didn't drink, didn't smoke. Yeah, always went to church.
Right.
But the more they looked into his life, the more they discovered Dick had also overbilled and swindled his clients out of as much as $50,000 over 3 years.
Wow.
He would charge them for ads he didn't run or that he didn't pay for. And he also published full-page airline ads without permission of the airline to make his magazine seem bigger than it was.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Will Ferrell in Semi-Pro when the guy throws the full court basketball and makes it.
Yes.
And Will Ferrell freaks out, because he doesn't really have the money. He's like faking the beer company.
Yeah, the beer people are going to pay
Yeah,
it.
and he goes, you just won a big check that says $10,000. It's a great movie.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. What's the name of Flint, Michigan?
Go ahead.
Flint, Michigan Mega Bowl. Flint, Michigan Mega Bowl.
What a great movie.
It is. But I digress.
Yeah. Okay. Back to the task at hand.
Back to the task at hand. Dick is using his magazine Impresario as a marketing tool to impress investors.
Gotcha.
And here's why. He wanted to create an international network of giant computerized warehouses, each based at an airport. They would all have a fly-in cultural center.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if his plan was for private air travel only or not, but Sabre was the first real computerized booking system. It could process over 7,000 bookings per hour with nearly zero error rate.
Wow.
And American Airlines was the first to implement it, and the year was 1964.
Okay.
Yeah. Sabre stands for Semi-Automated Business Research Environment.
Gotcha.
But when I was reading this, I was thinking, is he trying to put the central computer system in for airports everywhere? That would have been huge.
Yeah.
Dick's plan was to raise $100 million from investors known as the, quote, superior table, end quote.
Gotcha.
He described the table as a, quote, worldwide organization dedicated to complete peace and unity among all countries on earth, end quote.
Is he running for Miss America? What's he doing?
To me, it sounds like a new world order or something. Yeah.
World peace.
I really do want world peace. But its chairman was this mysterious figure named Robert, Roebert,
All right.
who presided over other investors with names like Mr. Thomas and Mr. Peters. And the cryptic references to Robert are even seen in a St. Christopher medal that Dick wore that was engraved with the words, quote, Richard, to my chosen son and heir, God bless you, Robert, end quote.
Okay.
It is found around his neck when the bodies are discovered.
Right.
And this is not a man who wears jewelry of any kind. So was Mr. Robert the Mr. Roberts expected on the night of the murders? And if that's the case, No such person ever arrived at the Pellston airport or even asked about the family after they're dead.
Okay.
Detectives learned that Dick had spent 3 days at the Metro Airport Hotel just before the family left for Good Hart. It's not the first time he had secretly checked into an airport hotel while telling his family he was away on a business trip.
Go figure.
Joe, who claimed he had zero idea of what his secretive employer Dick was up to,
Right.
said the hotel was probably being used as a headquarters for the new venture. But Dick evidently never left his room. He never saw any visitors or placed any unusual phone calls. So what, if anything, did these clandestine activities have to do with the murders?
Right.
Were Mr. Robert and other members of the superior table real or part of some elaborate fantasy? And to this day, nobody knows, but we're about to talk about it a little bit later.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Detectives Stern and Fliss also interview Harry Ford. He's the vice president of sales for the Masco Corporation, which included Dick's biggest client, Delta Faucet.
Okay.
And it's thought that Dick and Joe were overcharging and mishandling this client money, but they're doing it with the help of Harry, their insider.
Oh, wow.
And when Harry is interviewed, he tells police that Dick had always been honest when it came to billing the company, and even if occasional errors occurred, they were always corrected. But they have the forensic accounting records that proves that they were overcharged, that Delta Faucet was overcharged. So now they think Harry's in on the whole thing too.
Okay.
And police want Harry to take a polygraph test to prove he wasn't in on anything nefarious like a murder,
Right.
let alone the swindling embezzlement stuff.
Right. Did he do it?
Harry sends them a letter saying that both his doctor and his attorney advised him against taking a polygraph, which just makes him even more suspicious.
Harry.
Take the polygraph. Detectives Stern and Fliss submit their case that Joe Scolaro is the killer to the Emmett County Prosecutor's Office in 1969, and it is promptly rejected. Why? Well, the murder weapon had never been found. There was no physical evidence that could put Joe at the scene of the crime.
Right.
But many thought, even if they could prove that Joe was the killer, that Emmett County didn't want or couldn't afford to pay for a trial that would surely be sensational. This is supposed to be this little oasis where wealthy people come to relax.
Sure.
The police in Oakland County, Detroit's Men in Blue, had been assisting the officers in their investigation of the family's murder, and they were so convinced that Joe was guilty, they took the case after Emmett County dropped it. And how did they do this? They had evidence that Joe had been embezzling money from the magazine company. And now, because of that, it happened in Detroit, and they can claim that a crime was committed in Oakland County.
Yeah.
And they opened their own investigation.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Sorry, Joe.
On January 2nd, 1970, an intriguing lead emerged from Leavenworth Penitentiary in Kansas, of all places.
Okay.
Alexander Bloxam, a career criminal recently locked up for bank robbery, told detectives in 1968 he had shared a Detroit halfway house with a fellow parolee named Mark Warren Brock.
Okay.
And one day he drove Brock to a meeting at a Flint, Michigan restaurant with a dark, heavy-set man he remembered as Scolaro. Brock next went to Toledo to pick up some guns, then headed up north with a man named Robert Matthews in a borrowed blue Dodge. Bloxam was left behind because, quote, there weren't no colored men up in Good Hart, end quote.
Okay.
Brock returned 2 days after the murders. And Alexander's story is heavy with details, including information about a briefcase that belonged to Dick. Alexander then sees Mark Brock again on the 27th of June when Mark gives him a brown leather briefcase to dispose of. And this very briefcase description, brown and zipped on 3 sides, so it's like a portfolio case.
Right.
I had one when I was in advertising. You use it to show off your work.
Right.
But this is the case that many of Dick's secretaries have said is missing from his office. It's the one he took with him to the cabin.
Okay.
Alexander says that inside the case were various canceled checks under the name of Richard Robison, and there was paperwork for a business deal. Now, Alexander hides the papers in his parents' home, and he destroys the briefcase. And I think it's interesting that he remembered what the briefcase was, because back then, a briefcase that zipped on 3 sides, that's not really a normal briefcase.
Yeah, especially during that time.
Yeah. When police interview Mark Block, he tells them that he did go to Flint, Michigan with Alexander Bloxam, and they did buy guns in Toledo, and he did travel to northern Michigan and had been asked to be a triggerman on 3 occasions, and his price was $5,000.
Wow.
And Detective Stearns asks him, "Did you kill the Robison family?" And Brock tells him that even though he knows he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, he wouldn't tell them if he'd been the killer, and he wouldn't give them any information that he knew of on their murders.
Defiant till the end.
Yes.
Wow.
So Alexander tells his brother Roosevelt about the papers he stashed at their parents' home and how valuable they would be if he's ever arrested. And in his police interview, he tells the detectives that this thing is much larger than you could ever imagine.
Really?
Yeah. Later in 1970, Roosevelt Bloxam, Alexander's brother, is murdered, and Alexander thinks it's because he was in possession of the papers he had taken from the briefcase.
Oh.
Yeah, the one that Mark asked him to get rid of.
This thing keeps getting deeper and deeper.
It does. Yeah. These documents will never be found.
Okay.
Alexander Bloxam took what he called a, quote, liar's test, end quote, and he promptly flunked it.
Fail.
Yeah. Inconsistencies in his story, coupled with the lack of further cooperation from Brock and Matthews, caused this once promising lead to dry up. However, Link says Matthews did volunteer that, quote, Brock was ruthless enough to kill the family and Bloxam was too dumb to make up such a story, end quote.
So how do you really feel?
Yeah, we got one guy who's capable and another guy who's not. Yeah. That's what they're saying. Yeah. But they did comb through all of Dick's personal effects at home and in his home office. And although there were names, they were pretty stumped by a lot of it. And the leads kind of went nowhere. Okay. But there were also documents with strange symbols believed at that time to be Rosicrucian, meaning he was a member of a secretive society devoted to the study of metaphysical, mystical, and alchemical lore.
Really?
An anonymous pamphlet of 1614 about a mythical 15th century knight named Christian Rosencreuz is said to have launched the whole movement.
You're making all this up.
I am not. And one of the documents they find says, quote, the above shows the chain of power as decided by Mr. Robert, chairman and director of the Superior Table.
Wow. And what year was this?
1968, but if you're talking about the Rosicrucian, that's in the 15th century, 1600s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quote, the sovereign power of this worldwide organization, which is solely set on complete peace and unity among all countries of this earth. Each of the above-mentioned directors will receive a complete organizational breakdown from computer headquarters. If you have any questions, please direct them through the proper channels. Thank you, Sylvia, Secretary to Mr. Robert.
Okay, I'm trying to make heads and tails of this.
Yeah, so is he a part of this weird group of businessmen that are trying to have world domination? Or was he plucking people from this group that to get his investors? He's looking for $100 million. Yeah. So what are these guys really up to, right?
Yep.
It's really weird, but it's also a dead end.
Yeah.
The circumstantial evidence all pointed to Joe. And in 1973, prosecutor Brooks Patterson was this close to charging Joe Scolaro with conspiracy to commit murder. But someone tipped off Joe's mom, and she told Joe, tipped off his mama, they're coming for you. That's what she says, son, they're a-coming for you. That's what my grandmother would have said. Joe had bought Dick's business after his murder, and he'd run it into the ground. The creditors were after him as much as the detectives were. His mom had become his unpaid secretary. Yeah. On the afternoon of March 8th, 1973, 2 men entered Scolaro's office looking to collect a $730 debt. They discovered Scolaro in his chair, a bullet from his Beretta having sped through his brain before shattering a framed glass picture on the wall.
Wow.
On his desk was a suicide note.
Really?
Yep.
Good grief.
You ready for this suicide note?
Okay, go for it.
Quote, "Mother, where do I start? I am a liar, cheat, phony. Any check that any of the people have with your signature isn't any good because I forged your name to get it off my back. I know I'm sick, but seeking help isn't going to help the people I've hurt," end quote. And he added a postscript, quote, "I had nothing to do with the Robisons. I'm a cheat, but I am not a murderer," end quote.
Wow.
But it's interesting because some point to Joe's note as proof that he did not commit the murders.
Okay.
And others believe he carried his lies to his grave. Because when questioned about the note, Detective Stern says, quote, "Remember practically the first words in his suicide note were, 'I am a liar.'"
Yeah.
In other words, from this point on, don't believe anything I've written.
This may be totally off track. Are they sure that he wrote that note?
I think they're pretty sure he wrote the note.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they're pretty sure. So you're thinking that maybe somebody else came in, wrote the note, and killed him.
Yeah, who knows? I mean,
well, they do know he's very, very far in debt. There's tons of creditors are after him. He can't afford to pay anybody. That's why his mom's answered his phone being a secretary.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Joe is 38 years old and leaves behind a wife and 2 young sons, none of who knew what to believe.
Wow.
There were other suspects and scenarios that authorities looked at. So I don't want you to think it's just this.
Okay.
One of Dick's ex-secretaries later married a rich and powerful manufacturing tycoon with rumored ties to organized crime in Cleveland.
Okay.
About the time of the murders, the woman had had a miscarriage, and there were whispers that the baby was Dick's and not her 70-year-old husband's.
I like snow peas and talking
soup.
and not
we like talking. We could talk and not talk.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Also, one of the families of one of the companies that Dick swindled was thought to be associated with the mob as well.
Gotcha.
So we got mob, we got Rosicrucian, we've
got intrigue.
Partners. Yeah. In February of 1974, just a year after Joe's suicide, a stolen car taken from Toledo in 1966. It's 1974 and they find a stolen car from 1966.
Yeah.
Who's working the stolen car division?
Cold case.
I mean, seriously. It shows up abandoned on the side of a road in Plymouth Township, just west of Detroit. Police search the car, and in the glove box, there's a luggage tag that read, Shirley Robison, 1879 Dolores, Lathrop Village, Michigan.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
But after tracking down the people who had owned this car, they thought it was just another dead end. But why is a dead woman's luggage tag in your glove compartment?
Yeah, how can that be a dead end?
And finally, Martin Fulton, the brother of Dick's wife, Shirley. He had no obvious motive in June and July of 1968, but he is the only person who is seen at Somerset Cottage after they think the Robisons were already murdered. A red Volkswagen is seen at the cottage on the 4th of July, 9 days after the murders, but before they'd been discovered. And this same red car is seen back at the cottage a few days after the bodies are found. And the police begin their investigation. The car is traced to Martin Fulton. It's a red Opel sports car and not a Volkswagen Beetle. But these two cars do look similar.
Okay.
And the witness still said, that's the same car.
Right.
And he's there, after everybody's dead, asking police if he could come by and pick up a canoe. A canoe?
Okay.
And they said, yeah,
Okay.
come by and pick up the canoe.
Yeah.
So what was he really doing?
Yeah.
And even though Marvin says he had nothing to do with Dick's businesses, he is listed as a director with the Michigan Securities Commission. So when you incorporate, you have to list all the officers.
Sure.
The brother-in-law was listed. And they knew he had had dinner with Dick and Harry Ford from the faucet company of Delta Faucet. So what's all that about?
Right.
If he has no interest in the business, what is that all about? In the old police documents, you can clearly see that Marvin owned both a 25 caliber and a 22 caliber gun, and the police find that the shell casings left at the scene match the ballistics of the weapons owned by Marvin, but lots of his statement is redacted. So when they interview him, there's tons of stuff you just can't even read it, even today, 55 years later. It's all redacted.
Why?
Don't know.
Oh.
Yeah, but in the old documents, you can see Marvin owned a 25 and a 22.
Wow.
And police find that the shell casings left at the scene match the ballistics of the weapons owned by Marvin as well.
With these redactions, who are they trying to cover for?
But it's lots of redaction. I don't know.
Oh.
It's the new world order. Wow. They came in and it's the Illuminati.
Yeah, I was about ready to say, you chose wisely, my son.
Yeah, exactly. So if Joe was the strong suspect because of his guns, why didn't they investigate Marvin and his guns? Yeah. And at one point, police even thought the gardener, Monty Bliss, was a killer because he had a quick temper and he claimed that the Indian grounds that the cottages were built on were cursed land.
Really?
And he'd also lost his own son to a motorcycle accident just days before the Robisons were found. So people think maybe that just tipped him over the edge. His son's death tipped him over the edge. And he's often spotted around the cottages in the middle of the night talking to his dead son. And he's also found in the middle of the night in one of the cottages in the kitchen cooking himself some eggs.
Okay. You shouldn't be doing that, but it's not.
Doesn't make him a killer.
No, it's not that weird.
Doesn't make him a killer. I just think he has dementia. Yeah. I think his son's death took a toll on him. It makes sense. Yeah.
And he likes eggs.
Yes, and he likes eggs. But Monty Bliss took a polygraph test, and you know what? He passed it.
Oh.
Another theory, John Norman Collins, the infamous co-ed killer, is thought to be responsible for brutally torturing and murdering as many as 15 young women in Michigan and California between 1967 and 1969. Okay. His spree stopped after he raised the suspicions of his uncle, David Leake, a state police officer. Collins used Leake's Ypsilanti home to kill 18-year-old Karen Sue Beineman, a student at Eastern Michigan University, while Leake is vacationing in Canada. So his nephew is this co-ed killer, and he kills somebody in his home while he's on vacation. Wow. But coincidentally, co-ed killer John Collins and the Robisons' oldest son, Ritchie, attended Eastern Michigan University together. There were rumors that the two had even belonged to the same fraternity. And police investigating the Robisons' murders kept their eyes on Collins, but eventually they just eliminated him as a suspect in the case. Okay. Today, 55 years later, most believe that Joe Scolaro is the killer. One account talks about a $200,000 Keyman life insurance policy that Dick's company took out on him. Keyman life insurance is a real thing. If you work for a company and you've been doing all this stuff for the company and you get in your car and something bad happens, the company can have a life insurance policy on you for millions of dollars.
Oh, really?
Yes,
oh, wow.
And I've had Keyman life insurance before. And that's because if they have to replace you or what they have to do to make up whatever it is that you know,
True.
The company isn't just left high and dry.
Yeah, makes sense.
So Dick's company had taken out Keyman life insurance on him. Okay. And that was true. And Dick had completed the paperwork, but he had not taken the required physical. And many think that Joe thought the Keyman life insurance, that was a done deal.
Yeah.
So if he was dead, it was an extra $200,000 for the company.
In that time frame, $200,000 was worth a lot of money.
That's millions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Today, the case remains, quote, inactive and unsolved, end quote.
Wow.
An entire family wiped out in an area known as Michigan's summer playground. And the tales of the murders have stuck with the people who've lived in the town for generations. Coincidentally, the cottage Somerset had to be taken down to its foundation in order to get the stench out.
Ooh.
The land where the cottage actually sat remained vacant for 50 years. But I did read that it went up on the market about 5 years ago. Don't know if it was acquired by someone or not. Don't think I'd build a home on that ground.
No.
Monty's already said it's haunted by Indians and now a whole family's been killed there.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
So who was the killer? And what was the motive? Yeah. And how does it all fit together? 55 years later, we basically don't know any more than they did in 1968.
Yeah.
Very interesting, very sad. But that is the story of the Robison family and the Good Hart murders. And that's all I have to say about that. Hey, Hitched to Homicide listeners. Have you read any good books lately? Or have you listened to any good books? All of the Sex and Lies series books, as well as the Jane Doe series, are available on Audible and iTunes. Hotter than hell in half of Alabama, the Sex and Lies series begins with Sex, Lies, and Sweet Tea. There are 9 books to listen to in that series alone. Left as a newborn to die in a dumpster, she has no name. Tossed from foster home to foster home, she has no family. With no known past, she's deemed a perfect fit for a task force Washington denies exists. A selective assassin for the United States government, Jane Doe tracks down known terrorists on domestic soil. The Jane Doe books have been called a bit military, a bit assassin, and a bit genius. Start the new year by listening to a good book by me, Chris Calvert, on Audible or iTunes. Or if you like to read, go to chriscalvert.com and download some free books. And thanks for being a listener of Hitched to Homicide.
Wow, that's a case right there.
It's a nice little historical case, right?
I think if they do a movie on this, Jack Nicholson and Leonardo DiCaprio should be doing this one. I think it'd be perfect.
Who plays what? Jack is Dick?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Leonardo is Joe?
Like, who knows? It just seemed like a good couple.
I seriously think, they got together 50 years later, on the 50th anniversary, I believe it was, maybe it was 40th. They got together all the men who were still alive,
right,
who worked on this case. Mm-hmm. They all got together and they chatted about it. And the one thing that came out was they all just thought it was Joe. That it wasn't any, hocus pocus. It wasn't some secret society. It was just Joe. Yeah. And that if his ex-wife lied about what time he came back, it could easily be Joe. Yeah, easily be Joe.
Well, there you go.
I know.
Another unsolved case.
I know. I don't like to do unsolved cases, but that one was so interesting.
Well, let me give you a few solved cases.
Okay.
A little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right. This first one, I'm going to call it, he clearly didn't think it through.
Okay.
Surveillance video from Queensland, Australia shows a man robbing a service station while wearing a reusable grocery bag over his head.
Okay.
However, the knife-wielding man eventually had to remove his makeshift disguise in order to carry his loot in the bag, exposing his identity, and he was later found and arrested.
How did he see? Did he cut like little eye holes out or something?
Who knows?
That's what I'm thinking.
All right, number 2. And the Emmy goes to the dumbest criminal. Okay. Columbus, Ohio. Police say a quick-thinking bank teller in Ohio convinced a suspected robber to hand over his own license.
Oh.
Yeah. Authorities say a man walked into a Huntington bank in Columbus on June 4th and gave a teller a note saying he was armed and demanding money. The teller gave the man a stack of cash, but then he demanded more money from the electronic cash recycle machine in the bank's lobby.
Okay.
Yeah, this is where it gets good. Police say the teller told the man the machine needed a driver's license to dispense cash, so the man handed over his license. The license led the police to a 51-year-old man who was arrested June 15th and charged with aggravated robbery and threatened with a deadly weapon. There you go.
So wait a second. There's a place where you recycle money? Is that what you said?
Well, I think they're calling it recycle money, but it's an ATM.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah. Because they do take money out of circulation, so I didn't know what that meant.
Be that.
Okay.
Who knows?
Okay. You didn't know that?
No.
You didn't know that they took money out of circulation?
No, I'm an idiot. Okay, next one. Just a random question. It's important to be prepared, especially if you're going to rob a store. It is possible to be too prepared, though, which is exactly what happened to Daniel Glenn, who unexplainably decided to call ahead to ask the store how much cash was in the register.
How much you got? Because I'm coming to rob you.
Imagine how that conversation went, right?
Yeah.
Hello, I'd like to place a takeout order for all the money, and I'd like to get some fries with that.
Yeah.
Confused and slightly alarmed, the store owner immediately called the police, who arrested Glenn on his way to the store.
Bless his heart.
Yeah, exactly.
Bless his heart.
He did what? You might not be familiar with Salinas, California, but it's the hometown of a few famous folks. Writer John Steinbeck being one of them. And of course, 33-year-old Roberto Daniel Arroyo.
Okay, never heard of him.
He's more known as the doorbell licker.
Ooh.
Yeah. Sylvia Dungan's decision to install a Ring doorbell camera into her front door yielded a pretty curious home movie starring Arroyo as he licked the doorbell for 3 whole hours.
What? 3 hours he licks the doorbell?
Yep.
Where does he find the time?
After the case went viral online, police quickly caught up with him. They pointed out that the clear quality of the footage made him much easier to identify. Yeah. So a word of advice to would-be doorbell lickers.
Ew.
Yeah, maybe make sure to check for a camera before going about your licking.
I don't think he cared. I think he meant to do that.
So there's your bless your hearts.
A doorbell licker. That sounds like something somebody calls you in 4th grade, you know?
You dirty doorbell licker.
You're a butthead. You're a doorbell licker.
You're a doorbell licker.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
There you go.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, and hopefully you don't know any doorbell lickers.
Especially one that does it for 3 hours.
A 3-hour doorbell licker.
Yeah.
Go to hitchedtohomicide.com. There's a pull-down menu. You can also suggest a case. Yep. We love that. Yep. That's all we have today. That's my amazing husband out there.
That's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.